We have all heard by now the quasi-neo-eugenics being championed by many white people in America, easily summed up by this Stop White Genocide meme. I don't know if it is a response from them being afraid that their run of being the majority and power race is coming to an end, or if it is just run-of-the-mill racism with shiny new shoes. Or their new haircut might be a better analogy since all of their friends seem to have the same haircut as well. Now, I am not going to disparage them or anyone for being racist. Being racist is part of the human experience. Well, maybe not specifically racist, but we are, as a species, xenophobic by nature. Xenophobia was very useful to our ancestors, and in-group loyalty versus out-group hostility was a very important factor in our early years of evolution in keeping the gene pool alive and even in creating civilizations. In the modern day, this xenophobia, more acutely described in subgenres ranging from racism to sexism to religionism to homophobia, is not very useful. In fact, it is one of the main dividing factors and causes of our current social and political animosity. You could make a very good argument that if you could remove just one thing from our political landscape to have the greatest effect, from the one subtraction it would be xenophobia. It would have a larger positive effect than removing greed, corruption, and selfishness combined. I feel I must state that I don't believe for a fact that it would, but like I said, one can make a very good argument. And should we automatically disparage people for being proud of who they are? After all, you are not just your name and personality. Your family is a part of who you are. So is your culture and your religion and your ethnicity. Being proud of yourself means being proud of all of you. That is why many minorities speak of black pride and Latino pride, etc. But if you talk about white pride, you are automatically considered a racist. Isn't this a double standard? Well, of course it is. This is the definition of a double standard. And you know what? I think it is time to get rid of this hypocrisy. I think white people should be able to be openly proud of who they are, but if we want to get there, we have a lot of work to do. So, where do we go from here? We know what we need to do, but how can we do it? How can we convince people to ignore or even combat one of the most hardwired instincts? I think a good starting place is to show that not only is xenophobia a bad way to view the modern world, but it's not really even possible anymore. It is an instinct that is not only counterproductive, but it is a vestigial artifact. Much like the appendix, it is at best useless, and at its worst needs to be surgically removed. So to begin, let's look again at the Stop White Genocide meme. There is nothing in here that is inherently racist against other cultures. I do find the Africa is for the Africans and Mexico for the Mexicans rather beyond the pale, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt and take it for what I assume they meant, that all other races get to have their own places of majority, while whites will be doomed to be minorities no matter where they live. Now, I will return to the whole idea of half-breeding and hybriding later. For now, I just have one question to anyone who agrees with the logic of this meme. What do you mean by the term white? I'm sure you mean what we all mean by the term white people, and other white people. Look at all the white people. There are white people, black people, Hispanic people, Asian people, Arabic people, Hebrew people. Now you might have noticed that all of these are ethnicities that you can check off at a checkbox at the doctor's office except for two notable exceptions. But back to my original point, what do you mean by the term white? Skin color, sure, but normally when checking an ethnicity checkbox you will fill in Caucasian. Now the term Caucasian comes from the Caucasus, which is where the original Caucasians came from. The Caucasus are currently formed by countries above the Middle East and between Europe and Asia. Notable current countries include Georgia, Chechnya, and northern Turkey, among many others. These are all white people, by the way. I know we don't tend to think of Eastern European countries as white, but we do think of Russians as white. Interesting. Does anyone remember the term WASP? White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. The Saxons originated as a northern Germanic group that settled in modern-day Great Britain. They merged with the Angles to form the hybrid group Anglo-Saxon. The Angles are the ones who founded England, or England. There were many Germanic races of white people, most of whom eventually found a home elsewhere and with different names. The Franks were a Germanic race that founded France. But the Germans maintained as an independent ethnic group long enough to finally be awarded their own homeland of Germany in the 1800s. There were countless other white ethnicities, but for brevity, I will conclude that most of the non-Germanic and Anglo-Saxon ethnicities founded in Europe were of Caucasian descent, which is why we refer to most white people of European descent as being Caucasian. Since the different white ethnicities had become so varied, Caucasian was the only term broad enough to cover most white people. So when you speak of white genocide or white people being bred out of the future world ethnicities, which white people are you referring to? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would imagine it's that I am speaking gibberish and trying to win an argument using outdated terms and sounding intellectual. You know what I mean by white. White people who live in America or Europe or other historically white countries that have an ancestry of people who would be called white. I don't care what ethnicities they were 1500 years ago. What does that even mean in modern culture, the difference between Germanics and Anglos and Franks? And who cares? What difference does it make? I'm talking about white people today. Now, that is a very good point, and it happens to be my point. Ethnicities are always commingling and hybriding and creating new ones. This has always been the case and always will be the case, and I don't think any of you are worried about a certain flavor of white becoming mulatto. You are worried about white people becoming a minority or being phased out like the Goths or the Persians. Well, I've got good news for you. White people are not going anywhere. There is a reason why all peoples who live far away from the equator become whiter over time. I'm not going to go into the details, but it has to do with adaptation and cost. Dark pigment is costly from the gene's perspective. It uses vitamins and resources that could be used elsewhere. It is a lot easier in terms of embryology to build white skin than dark, and in any area where darker skin does not give some kind of Darwinian advantage, the average skin color in a population will become paler over time. So guess what, white people? You win again. Celebration. But I feel that many of those who are afraid of white genocide are not satisfied with this argument, even if they accept it. This video is not about the evolution or adaptation or specific history of ethnicities. It is about xenophobia. So if you accept my argument that modern-day white people are a mix of vastly different ethnicities that happen to be white in the modern era, and you feel that it doesn't matter where the ethnicities originally came from, and are merely trying to protect the white race, and you understand that in the future, we will have terms such as Anglo-Hispanic or Anglo-Latino, and the difference between the two words will be the same as Anglo-Saxon, and the bearers of these monikers will be white-skinned. You accept all of this, and yet you still feel the need to protect or promote white purity. This feelings is by all accounts an oxymoron. Now, if you feel that you are protecting an American culture that you feel is being invaded, that is a valid concern. I feel that the concern is misplaced, but that is another video. The current concern is about race and ethnicity and skin color. Anyone who still feels threatened by an invasion of non-whites into the gene pool and into a majority status in the US or any other predominantly white country are suffering from a vestigial xenophobia, an out-group distrust or animosity that was very useful to our ancestors but completely defunct today, much like the appendix. For many people, it does not pose a problem and they can just ignore it. But just like someone with appendicitis, you are suffering from xenophobia. You have a vestigial artifact that has become inflamed and is in danger of damaging its host. Just like an appendix before it bursts, you need to have your vestigial xenophobia surgically removed. Now, how do we remove such a hard-grained instinct? Well, the first part is consciousness raising. Sometimes merely understanding that there is a problem and why the problem exists is enough to look at it from a different enough of a viewpoint to remove the problem or at least to isolate it. And I think the issue with xenophobia runs deeper than that. I think one of the issues is that we conflate pride in our own in-groups with hatred or at the very least degradation of others. This should not be the case. There should be no shame in being proud of who you are, no shame in being proud of your heritage. We should always be honest with ourselves and others about the history of our ancestors. We can never just gloss over the bad and celebrate the good. We must learn from our people's mistakes and build upon our triumphs. We must be more than the fears and failures of our fathers. But we must understand that a part of our self-identity is our family, and culture, and community. A part of our self-identity is our ethnicity, and our religion, and our language. We should be proud of who we are, and where we come from. But just remember, everyone else has the same right to be proud of their family, and their culture, and their ethnicity, and their religion. Ethnicities come and go, grow and wither, combine and expand. In 100 years, who knows who we will be? But for now, you are you. And regardless of your race, religion, or creed, be proud of who you are and where you come from. And you know what? While you're at it, give us a reason to be proud of you too.